Hey, what's up everyone? This is Adam here with Probably Got This, and today I want to try to help you set yourself up for success in ESO if you want to play the game as a solo character. Playing as a hybrid or solo in ESO isn't something that everyone will be able to just pick up and do. It's something that takes knowledge of your class and your rotation. There's going to be a lot of players that will find this or try this game out because of the RPG Skyrim back in the day, and they are going to naturally want to make a solo character. At least from my experience of newer players that have played the game, this has been what has been true. They have wanted to make a character that they could basically just take on the world with. This game definitely leans towards playing with other players because it is an MMO, massive multiplayer online. But it's nice because it does allow solo play. And so with this guide, I hope to show you some tips on how you can start learning how to play solo and how to do it effectively. Before we get started, I want to remind you, if you want to watch me play live, I play on twitch.tv/probablygotthis in the evenings on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Eastern Standard Time. And if you want to join my Discord, the Brafia, or my guild, the Necrodaddies, we have a great growing community of new and veteran players that you can link up with. And be sure to like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more content. And that bell icon is ready to be rung if you want to be notified when I post new videos. Also, I want to remind you of the Greymoor giveaway that I'm doing in this channel. You can win a free copy of the $60 edition of Greymoor. The link of the video will be in the description, but let's go ahead and jump into the video. Let's start off by talking about what you can't do as a solo player in this game. Basically, not much. The only thing that you literally can't do solo is trials, which are the 12-man raids in this game. If I have misspoken on this, please let me know, but I am almost positive I don't think it's actually possible to do a raid solo. But this solo guide is going to be focused on the 95% of the rest of ESO, which I think is pretty awesome because that means most of the content in this game can be soloable. Now, is it easy? Not really in some cases, but it is possible. What would be the reason you may want to solo content? Well, maybe you just like playing the game by yourself, or you haven't found a group of people to play with yet. But some people just do it for the challenge. They like to set these goals for themselves and see if they can reach them. So I'm going to break this video down into some parts here. There will be timestamps for you all, so if you want to skip to certain sections, you can. So here are the categories. I'm going to go over the 3 most important things, in my opinion, about soloing. We're going to go into Magicka versus stamina builds, which classes are best, some examples of skills to run if you're playing solo. I'm going to go briefly into some buff foods and champion point stuff, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of sets that you can wear or find in the zones or in the game that can help you solo or play the game. Again, like I said, most content in this game is soloable, so now I want to break down the 3 most important aspects of playing solo that you need to understand and strive to accomplish. They are sustain/resource management, self-healing/survivability, and DPS/rotation knowledge. These aspects are what shape a huge part of the game already when you play with your character, but they are vital to anyone wanting to make a solo build. So let's dive into these a little deeper because you may be asking, what the hell does some of this mean, Adam? So I want to go ahead and tell you. So first off, sustain or resource management is so key to being able to solo vet dungeons or harder content. Sustain is basically how long you can keep your DPS rotation going without running out of your resources, hence resource management. Your resources are your Magicka and stamina and health, obviously, but mainly your Magicka and stamina. All builds use these to do damage and use their abilities. So with saying that, you have to be able to manage these effectively or you'll stop doing DPS, which will in turn not kill bosses, or you will not be able to heal yourself or apply debuffs, which will eventually get you killed. So what are some ways to effectively manage this? Well, first you need to make sure you have the right gear enchants, the right gear traits, and the right gear in general, i.e. gear set bonuses and all that. So for the gear enchants, you want to go with the normal ones that you would normally go with in a non-solo build. If you're a Magicka, you're mainly going to need Magicka armor enchants. If you're a stamina, you're going to need stamina armor enchants. The traits are the same as well for the most part. Divine for armor is usually the best trait overall for you. It doesn't matter if you're playing solo or in a group. Next, with gear, you want to make sure that the gear correlates to your build resources again. If you're a Magicka, you need to look for sets that make Magicka abilities cheaper or give you more maximum Magicka, basically things of that nature. This is the same for stamina sets as well. The sets can hopefully also have an overarching set ability that can maybe debuff the target or buff you. And we're going to go into some sets here a little later in more detail. Another thing that plays into sustain or resource management is the races that you can choose and the points that you can put into your health, stamina, and Magicka. For races, if you're a Magicka character, the superior race for sustain is Breton. I mean, everyone knows this for the most part that has played this game for a while. Breton is just a great race. It's got so many great passives that help you sustain. It doesn't mean that you can't choose other races, but it will get you the best results. If you're a stamina, it is usually an orc, I would say, because orcs, have great passive abilities for stamina. But again, take that how you will. Ultimately, it's up to you. Now, for your attribute, I think a common misconception is players think that if they are going to go solo, especially a newer player, when they want to make a solo character, they start dumping a lot of points into health because they think that this will allow them to stay alive longer. And it's actually the opposite. Since Magicka and stamina is a resource that allows you to do damage in this game, you need to make sure you have plenty of it. Some builds require all of your points to go into Magicka. Some require some into health and Magicka. For stamina, some require the same as Magicka attributes, basically, where they have a split, But for attribute allocation, I would recommend for Magicka, you need at least 40 points into it, and no less, if you're going to put points into health. For stamina, I would say the same thing, but you can probably get away with a little more points into health with stamina solo builds. But again, you have to make sure you have enough points into stamina and into Magicka. I will say that this guide is supposed to be an overview of how you make your character effectively for soloing. If you guys are looking for specific solo builds or specific builds in general, you guys should check out Outcast or Dots. I can link their websites in the description. They are masters at making builds in this game. I am not a master at making builds in this game. I feel like I'm better at teaching newer players how to play the game and giving general overviews of how systems work in the game. But if you guys want specific builds, you guys should totally check them out because they have great builds that go into all types of detail. But these are, again, just overall rules that I would say. You just want to make sure that you have more points into your Magicka or stamina than your health. And if you're going to put some points into health, I honestly just would not go any lower than 40 because you start doing that and you're really going to run out of resources. Because I run out of resources at 64 points into Magicka when I'm not solo sometimes. So maybe I'm just bad, but that alarms me when I would have to put more points into health, So I just want to say that. So just check them out if you guys want to look into more specific things with that. The next topic of the 3 most crucial things in building a solo character is self-healing or survivability. Survivability is kind of tied to sustain, but I'm referring to it as more of just not dying in this situation. Self-healing is something you will need to have if you plan to do things solo, especially harder content, because you do not have a healer. Normally as a DPS, you can just freely dodge red circles of death and other boss mechanics while doing damage. But you want to make sure you have skills on your bar that can heal you, and even better, some skills on your bar that can do damage and also heal you at the same time, like the Puncturing Sweeps ability in the Templar class. Survivability is going to be referring here to things, like I said, that can keep you alive. Again, self-heals do keep you alive, but shields are also important. And things like Harness Magicka gives you a shield. Debuffs also are good for survivability because you can apply those to bosses as well, and you can help them not do damage to you for as long. CC or crowd control is also another great way to have survivability. These are all important things to have as a solo player in ESO. Again, we will go into more detail of skills here later that you can look out for. Another thing about survivability is the knowledge of the content you're doing. Don't be afraid to wipe or die in content. You need to learn at some point. You can watch guides all day, but you need to try the content for yourself and you need to understand how it works. This plays a key role in surviving longer in the fight. The last thing I want to mention about survivability is knowing when to use quick slot items like potions. These should be on your quick slot bar and ready to be used when, say, you get hit for a massive amount of damage, or you need a little more Magicka or stamina for some DPS. I will go into some buff food here later, but it'll be a very brief description. The last of the 3 most crucial things in building a solo character is the actual DPS and your rotation knowledge. You have to be able to do damage, obviously, or otherwise you're going to sit there and do nothing and you're going to die. Having enough DPS skills on your bar is also very important. You don't want 5 healing skills and 5 DPS skills. You want to have a balance. Again, sets play a huge part in this for weapons and armor for the most part, and I'll go again over that momentarily, but basically everything I mentioned in the first 2 points culminate to your DPS and rotation knowledge. You also need to have some single target DPS skills on your bar, and you need to have some AoE target abilities. You have to be able to clear mobs or adds, and if you can't clear adds with AoE abilities, then you will die a lot. But you need single target so you can burn the boss down quicker. So that's why that's important. How well you perform your rotation is dependent on your attribute allocation and if it's viable, how you manage your resources, what sets you're wearing, what debuffs and buffs you're giving yourself and the boss. Are you able to heal yourself? These are all things that play into the rotation of skills. You have to be able to learn this and perform it well. You need to be able to not waste resources by using a dot or an AoE ability on a target twice when the skill is still active. You need to not panic if a lot of enemies spawn and you take a lot of damage. These are all things that will affect you as you play solo. You have to be able to stay calm and know how to work your build and manage everything. Now, you won't get this perfect at first. Again, it's okay to die. You can just keep learning from your mistakes and get better at your rotation. Because once you master your rotation, if your DPS isn't enough or your healing is enough, then you know that it means it's not your ability to do your rotation. It may be something with your skill setup. It may be your attribute points. It may be that you have the wrong set on. Rotation knowledge is a great way to measure how good you are at this game. Because I've seen people do content at very low CP levels because they know their rotation and they know how to do it in and out. And I've seen people at 810 CP not be able to do some of the simplest of content because they don't know their rotation as well. Rotation knowledge in DPS is key with playing solo. So now I want to talk about Magicka versus stamina. In my personal opinion, I feel as if Magicka is the best resource to go for when selecting a solo class. Just for some reason, again, I think a lot of the self-heal abilities are Magicka based, and stamina characters, you are using your resources like blocking and running and roll dodging, and that takes away and dips into your overall resource pool when you want to use an ability. And I feel like Magicka characters can spec into more Magicka points than health because of some of that. Now, I know there are solo stamina builds, and I've seen some pretty badass ones, and I've seen people utilize them really well. So with stamina, I think it's fair to say that it requires more skill to master solo than Magicka. I think that's just what it is. So that I will leave up to you or how you want to pick that. Now, when it comes to picking an actual class, what is the best one for solo? I believe that every class can be made into a solo character, but I think Templar is the most suited for solo. It has so much self-heal built into the class. It has a whole healing line. It has self-heal. It also has DPS, like puncturing sweeps, which I mentioned earlier. It also has some tanking and CC built in as well. It gives you some of the best tools for success. Now, with saying that, I still believe that other classes can be made very viable, and I think Warden has great tools as well. Self-heal, damage, and CC. Dragonite has great damage, great shields, and the best CC and tanking, I think, of all the classes. Nightblade has some amazing damage, CC, and self-heals. Necromancer has some of these things as well, and Sorcerer has some great damage and some CC and self-heals as well. When it comes to picking your class, you really just need to think, which one first will I have the most fun playing? You may end up playing a Templar and being like, wow, this is really boring, because I know a lot of people that think Templar is really boring. Then you play Nightblade and you're like, wow, this class is way more fun. This plays a big part into your success playing solo because some classes are just flat out boring for some people. Some classes, the rotations are harder to master for some people. So finding a rotation that you understand and can perform will help you be more successful. But I think if I had to pick one class to play solo, it would be Templar. If we had to pick one and one only. But find the class that works best for you. This is where we are going to transition into some actual skills to look for when you're playing solo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down each class first and tell you some skills that are pretty dire to have on your bar for each class, in my opinion. And then I'm going to go over some skills that are universal that every class can use. So first, let's start with Templar. Puncturing sweeps, so stabbing people with light is what this ability does, but this deals damage and heals you while you deal damage. Blazing Spear is a huge AoE ability that's great damage over time. Channel Focus is a big source of your resistances and sustain. And Solar Barrage is another great AoE ability while also increasing light attack damage for you in your class. Now next is Warden. Some skills are Deep Fissure. This does damage and puts a major debuff on the target. Bird of Prey is great because it makes you faster, but it also gives you an automatic damage buff just for having it on your bar. So you could put it on both bars if you want. It's crazy. Blue Betty is an amazing little pet that gives you a lot of your recovery for your resources, and it has buffs that can also apply to you. And then the Fetcher Infection is a great dot to apply on bosses and on mobs as well. Nightblade abilities that are crucial are Dark Shade, which applies a debuff on your enemy as well as it also has an AoE attached to it. Swallow Soul is like Puncturing Sweeps. It deals damage and heals you. Siphoning Attacks is an amazing sustain tool, and Sap Essence is a great source for AoE damage, and again, it heals you. Ding, ding. Sorcerer is next. Your pet, Volatile Familiar, is great because it is an AoE, and it also like taunts basically enemies for you, and it's just on every sorcerer build. I mean, it's just great, guys. Just run this, please. Critical Surge is a great heal. Hardened Ward and Balanced Storms are also great skills, with Hardened Ward giving you some tankiness and Balanced Storms giving you resistances as well as AoE around you. Also, I want to mention that a lot of these skills are for the Magicka variant of the class. If you want to run stamina, then some of your skills have some stamina variants. Not all of them do, but when you morph them, just keep that in mind. So I just want to mention that to you. Next is Necromancer. The Bone Scythe is amazing if you're Magicka, and Healing Scythe is solid. It's basically like Puncturing Sweeps. The Spirit Guardian is great because it basically blocks some of the damage you take and it heals you. Glacial Colossus is an ultimate, and it's amazing, and I mention it because it's literally such a good ultimate, and you should run it. And then with Dragonites, I would say Eruption is amazing because it's a good AoE. It lasts a long time. Engulfing Flames just buffs your overall damage, which is amazing. Burning Embers heals you, so it's kind of like, again, Puncturing Sweeps. Volatile Armor is a good shield or resistance skill. Now, for stamina, again, I want to mention, I don't think these are as common, and you really don't use as much of your class abilities as you do weapon skills or universal ones. The skills I just mentioned, again, are Magicka spec specific skill morphs, because again, I believe Magicka is easier to play and more common as a solo option. Now, let's talk about universal skills that are good that every class can utilize. Every class can use any weapon or any armor tree or any guild, or basically any overworld skill line like Soul Magic. So for weapons, if you're looking for a Destruction Staff, Wall of Elements is a great skill for staff users. Elemental Drain is another one for staff users. For stamina users, Bow and Two-Hand are great for stamina classes. So Reverse Slice, Wrecking Blow, and Brawler are great two-handed skills. I use that on my normal stamina characters, but they're also really good for solo. Endless Hail is also a good bow skill. Again, I use that on my non-solo stamina characters. For light armor, Harness Magicka is a great skill for those users. It gives you a shield, which is really nice, and a few other things. You can read that on the skill there, but it's a great skill to use for anyone using light armor. Vigor is great because it is a good self-heal, and that is in the PvP skill line. And then Consuming Trap is a soul magic skill that is also really universal and is good as well. These are all skills that any class can use and that I would say are most common when people try to solo content. Now, I'm going to go briefly into buff food and champion points. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail just because, again, Outcast and Dots have some great build videos that you can look specifically at some of that stuff. Their IQ is like 1,000 compared to mine, and they just know a lot more about those systems. So I'm just going to cover like a general overview here. I would say for my Dragonite, if you're Magicka, I use Long Fin Pasty with melon sauce. This is a great buff food for Magicka characters. It's what I use on all my Magicka characters. It basically, it's going to buff your health, your Magicka, and your Magicka recovery, and that's what you're looking for. If you can find a food that does that, get that food, okay? For stamina, it's basically the same thing. Like, you want to get a buff to your stamina recovery, and some health if you can. So these are some of the things you want to look for when you're looking for buff foods. When it comes to the champion point system, again, there's so much that you can go into here, but some basic tips I would say that you need to just keep in mind is always spec some points into giving yourself more resources. So if that's max stamina or max Magicka or Magicka recovery or stamina recovery, make sure you're doing that. Make sure to spec into stronger AoE damage, because again, when you get into bigger mobs, you're gonna have to be able to do a lot of damage. So like Thaumaturge is a great thing to spec into for AoE damage. And then you also want to make sure you spec into some resistances because you don't want to get absolutely destroyed. So that's something that you don't have to give any skill points up for. You can just spec into maybe some resistance or like physical resistance or spell resistance. That was always something good to spec into. So these are some basic things that you can spec into on your champion tree. I'll leave that up to you guys, how you guys do that. That's your decision with all that. So those are just some basic things that you can spec into. So finally, we're on the last part now. We're going to go into some sets now that you should look out for when playing solo. But I'm going to go over some overarching general sets that are good for Magicka and stamina builds. For Magicka, we have some basic sets like Juliano's, Magnus's Gift, and Mother's Sorrow. Juliano's gives spell critical and maximum Magicka. Magnus' Gift gives Magicka recovery and the ability to negate the next Magicka ability used. Mother's Sorrow gives spell critical and maximum Magicka. Then a higher end set that is from a trial called Sunspire, which means you're going to have to do this on another character, is False God's Devotion. This is just an amazing set in general, but this is a pretty good set. False God's Devotion, basically, it gives you resources back, it gives you a damage buff, and it reduces the cost of abilities. This is a perfect example of what I was saying earlier, how sets matter. Because if you have this set, its abilities are going to significantly help you play more effectively. Then some monster sets or 2-piece sets that are good for solo are Grothdar and Zon for Magicka. Grothdar has an insane AoE that procs basically all the time, and Zon is basically best in slot for single target DPS for monster helms. These are monster helms I use for group content, and they're just amazing for solo content too, because I solo some of my Magicka character. They're amazing. So definitely try to get those. Also, another one you can look out for is the Valken Scoria 2-piece set. This one procs when you activate AoE abilities. I love this one. I actually love this on my Templar. This brings meteors down when you proc an AoE, and it does a lot of damage because Templars usually run a lot of AoE abilities, and so that's another 2-piece to look out for. Grothdar is from Vaults of Madness, Zon is from the Scalecaller Peak, and Valken Scoria is from City of Ash 2. Now for some stamina sets, we have, Hunting's Rage, Spriggans, Briarheart, and then the big one here is Vicious Serpent. These are all pretty typical stamina armor sets that will bring you great results in general. But the main thing I want to focus on, again, is Vicious Serpent, because, again, this buffs your damage, and it restores stamina and reduces the cost of stamina abilities. This is a theme you'll see. If you can find armor that does all of this, that's some of the best combinations that you want as a solo character. So I'm sure there are other sets out there that do some of this, but this is why I want to give you a few that I know and I have had experience with. So we've reached the ending of the solo guide, and for some of you, there may still be some questions that you want to ask. That's perfectly fine. Leave me a comment on what you don't understand, and I'll try to help you as best I can. Also, if you ever want to stop by and ask me questions on stream, again, you can find me on twitch.tv/BrahWeGotThis on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. You can also join our Discord, the Brafia, and our guild, the Necrodaddies, and you can ask questions there as well. All of those links will be in the description, but all in all, I hope that this video has helped you in some way. I hope that it helps you set your character up for success if you're wanting to solo content in ESO. If you like the video, make sure to crush the like button and subscribe for more content. You can also ring that bell to get notifications. But anyways, guys, just remember to have faith, be great, and I'll see you guys on ESO.